Welcome to the 8 Billion Project, where we're on a mission to make an impact by discovering and sharing the purpose of every person on this planet. I'm your host, Liza Florida. Enjoy today's episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 8 Billion Podcast. I am your host, Liza Florida, and today we've got an extra special guest. She is a motivational social entrepreneur and experienced mentor for changemakers. She is the founder and CEO of DAREHuman, a fast-growing brand focused on the elevation of humanity through programs and coaching that shows every individual how they can be a force for good in their lives. And in this world born with fierce feminine energy, Susanne is the untamed fox who's relentless in her desire to wake people the F up, her priorities of people, planet, and profit, leave a footprint of fairness, equality, and sustainability on everything she touches. Welcome, Susanne Goldstein, to the 8 Billion Podcast. How are you today?
I am fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you have me tongue twisted because I could feel the energy in your bio. And I am absolutely on fire right now. You have no
I love it. I'm excited to talk to you.
Well, Susanne, gosh, I don't even know where to start between DAREHuman and all the work that you've done. But maybe you could give us just your elevator pitch, because we did do that in our pre-podcast. Or actually, it wasn't even a pre-podcast. We were meeting just the other day just to talk about how we could change the world.
That's right. So gosh, that 3-minute talk about what you've done in a life is so challenging, but I'll try to do it this way. I had my waking up experience when I was about 4 years old. And ever since then, I have been on this charge to figure out how I can make the world a better place, a fairer place, a more just place. And I took a very circuitous route to get here. Someone would describe it as like a portfolio career. I was trained in mechanical engineering and theater and film. I got my first job out of college by sitting in the lobby of the National Theatre of Great Britain for 8 straight days until someone would give me a job. And I have kind of made my way into every industry I've ever been in. I produced my first Hollywood movie when I was 27 years old. And then when the web was just first starting, I became a very early consultant, architect, and business builder in this brand new thing called the internet. And so over my career, I have been supporting people, coaching people, advising people, mentoring people to become a different version of themselves, one that actually cares about their impact as much as they care about their income. And so my journey has been incredible. I ended up going to the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, and I taught social entrepreneurship there for a couple of years. And wrote a best-selling book about how to live the life you've always wanted to live called Carry a Paintbrush, How to Be the Artistic Director of Your Own Career. And in 2020, I launched DAREHuman as a result of me having this big life that I love to go around and solve big problems in the world. And so what would happen is my coaching and consulting practice would kind of be put on the back burner while I went off and did something crazy, like write a book or do a TV show about the urban-rural divide in our country. And I decided to come online with my business because I didn't want to have to rebuild every time I finished doing one of my, what I call crazy projects. And so DAREHuman started in June of 2020, and it has been an incredible journey, creating a community of people who are really focused on mission first and money second. It's an incredible world.
Well, then there's no coincidence why we got connected, because this has been a mission for me and has been a beautiful unfolding of an ascension process for me. But I just want to let the audience know Susanne is a powerhouse. I mean, just in that meeting that I had with her and her giving me her 3-minute spiel, I was just like, how did you put that all into 3 minutes?
It was probably different today than it was the other day. I can't remember what I say.
But one of the things that truly impresses me, and we said this in the conversation, in this process of our human evolution, whether it's staying in our professional corporate jobs or switching journeys and going down a mission, really it's who you become in the process.
Mm-hmm.
That becomes the base of everything.
Yeah, that was a big conversation we had. It's not the what. It's not the what you do. It's the who you are as you do it.
Yes.
And so our evolution starts there.
Yes. And when that clicks, you become this conscious human soul, and it's moment after moment. It's in everything you do. You don't put your best foot forward only at moments when you believe that it's there. It's who you are being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's living in the container of constant transformation. One of the funny things I do, of many, is that I literally upgrade myself like software. So I started my journey of waking up, I would say when I was 4, but then of course life comes along and it tries to lay coding on you and imprints on you and tell you that this is the way you should be in society. This is your expectation. This is where you should go to college. This is what you should do with your life. And at 27, I decided to start unpacking this whole thing and decide which pieces of the coding that had been infused into me I wanted to maintain and what I wanted to move forward with. So the beginning of this journey, I was living in Los Angeles and I was working in Hollywood, and I noticed that everyone around me was super judgmental. And everybody, it was the, late 1980s, early 1990s. And it was just a really challenging time in life. I think there hadn't been so much of a conscious awakening, and I realized that kind of person. And so I gave myself my very first theme. I grow through themes. And when I assign myself a theme, it's something that I take on for a year and I become a different version of myself. And so I upgrade myself like software. And that was the beginning of Susanne 2.0. And now I'm on Susanne 25.0. I had a huge upgrade recently. So it's sometimes they're dot release upgrades like Susanne 20.1 or 20.2, but this time it was a huge, big upgrade.
No, that's absolutely amazing, because if we really think about it, right, we are in the matrix and this is the simulation. If people can understand that to a deeper level.
Yeah. And the thing is that we're always like the thing that we have going on in our heads is just a system of electrons and signaling patterns. And why can't we change them? I totally believe in neuroplasticity and what we can do with ourselves, with our mindset, and with our connection to source to create the world that we want to live in.
You are just an amazing force of a combination of science and spirituality and everything put together. Really quick, Susanne, could you go back? How did you know at 4 years old, though?
My origin story is kind of crazy. So I grew up in a suburban area outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And it was, we lived in the woods and it was a lot of fun. And I had this friend named Kimmy when I was 4. And we would play in this brook behind her house. And, of course, the brook ran from like the fence on one side of our house to the fence on the other side of the house. It was pretty long distance. But for us, that was a huge brook when you're 4 years old. And we would just play there. And then winter came and we couldn't play by the brook anymore. And then spring came and I ran over to her house. I'm like, Kimmy, let's go play by the brook. And so we went down, and this little brook, which maybe was like 1.5 feet wide. We're not talking huge. We're tiny people. And we went to go look for the brook, and I could barely see it because all these trees and branches and leaves and pine cones and pine needles had fallen during the fall in New England. And the brook was barely running with water. And I felt really bad for the water. And every day for 2 weeks, I would drag my friend Kimmy down there with our little now 5-year-old fingers and start pulling all of the pine cones and pine needles and all this stuff so the brook could flow freely. I just needed to unblock the water so the water could flow freely. And it was a really amazing metaphor.
It was.
For my life. But what happened, and this is part of the imprinting and coding, is that when I was 5.5, I had another friend I used to play with. And I used to run over to her house, I was that kid. I ran around the neighborhood, knocked on people's doors, and we went out and played. And this one girl, her name was Kathy, she used to come running out in the woods with me. And one day I ran across her house. I knocked on the door. She opened the big, thick door and left the screen door closed. And she said to me, I'm not allowed to play with you anymore. And I said, why not? And she said, because you're a Christ killer. And I'm like, what's a Christ killer? And she slammed the door in my face. And I went running back over to my mom, bawling my eyes like, Mama, Kathy won't play with me. And my mom, being a good Jewish mom, said, what did you do wrong? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm a Christ killer. I'm a Christ killer. Well, and my mother was furious. And so what happened is that fall, I went to school to first grade. And it was the first time I had suddenly realized that people could see something about me that was different. I didn't know I was a Jew growing up. I didn't know I was different, but I had been so otherized by this little girl and her family. You know, my mother ran across that street. She's like, don't you ever come near my child again. But what happened as a result of it is I got to first grade, get dropped off on the bus. I'm nervous. I don't know where I can go. I feel like I have a scarlet letter on me that every kid is going to be able to look at me and see that somehow I'm a Christ killer. And so what happened is this busload of kids came in, and they had very brown and black skin. I had never seen a dark-skinned person before. And this was the beginning of busing in Boston. Mm-hmm. And these kids started piling off the bus. And I was like, well, they look different. And clearly I look different. Remember, I'm a blonde-haired, brown-eyed girl, but to me, I look different. I must be. Someone otherized me like that. And so I befriended all the black kids. And so I grew up understanding that there was a difference in how people viewed each other. So I think these two things that happened to me at age 4 and 5 really framed who I am. And it wasn't until I got out of the otherization and really decided to claim who I am, which was much later in life and through a lot of pain, that I could actually start using all of what I had learned through those experiences to help change the world.
No, that's amazing. I mean, that's why I was like, I'm going to ask her, because I had one incident probably when I was probably 6 or 7 years old. I had this huge mirror in our house, like floor to ceiling. And I stopped one day and I said, who am I? Who am I? I literally was staring at the mirror and said that for 10 minutes. And then it was just like this moment I'll never forget for the rest of my life. But my true awakening really didn't happen until maybe the first bout of it in 2008. Then the really knocks me off my feet was 2019. But it's incredible how, and that's why I love having these interviews, because you could see the different journeys that everyone have taken to do that.
Yeah. The beautiful thing about the waking up process to me is once you see, you cannot unsee. Mm-hmm. And so every piece, every layer that we pull back, we see something else. We start to realize that there's just so many layers of consciousness that we can go. You can look around the street around you and you can see the systems and structures that we live in, the matrix that has been set up for us. I have a masterclass that I taught called Lessons from the Matrix. It's all about the movie The Matrix. Mm-hmm. And it was a 3-day masterclass that is now available in my store. But in it, I talked about, what is this construct of the matrix? But day 2 was so interesting because what came through for me about it is something called forced productivity. This idea that if you're not an active doing contributor to society, that you have no value. And so we have bought into this framework, this matrix, to say, if you're in feminine energy, if you lean back and allow life to happen, if you're an observer until you get the motivation, you're a bad person. You should be driven. You should be leaning forward. You should be always in your doing masculine energy. And I'm like, we got to break that paradigm. So for me, it's always been a really important thing to, like I said, wake people the F up so that they can start to see what they're missing.
Yeah. It's interesting that you talk about that, because right before we turned on, or right before we started recording this, I had that whole, I've had the revelation, and I just posted something on my socials that said, I can no longer be quiet about this. It's burning too much. It's got to have a release. Mm-hmm. And so I know that I say that because we've shifted into this feminine space. For weeks now, we've been feeling the masculines uprise about it, because maybe whether they're consciously aware of it, they can feel it. And so that's what I said is just, move into your feminine space and receive it, because it's not going away. And these women are going to start stepping into it. unapologetically, wholly, fully. It was meant to be.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of masculine energy when it's appropriate, right? We all are made up of both masculine and feminine energies. The yin and the yang together make the whole, right? So we need both. And we get to learn when to lean into them. So one of the things you and I talked about is what I call the Tao of DAREHuman. What does it mean for a person to be DAREHuman? And so it's based on these 4 archetypes: the alchemist, the artist, the accelerator, and the advocate. And within each of those archetypes, the idea is in the alchemist to know oneself, to go deep in the emotional intelligence, the personal power, the self-mastery, to learn who you are. Because if you want to really affect change in the world, you've got to start with deep self-knowledge, because otherwise any kind of controversy can just throw you off center. So we've got to know ourselves. And then the artist is all about living on purpose, meaning find the thing that lights you up like a freaking firecracker and do that thing. Make sure it's in alignment with your true north, like the point in the sky that is your guiding light, and live that. And then the accelerator archetype is all about getting shit done and making money. And that part of it is the masculine energy we need to create the doing. Otherwise, we can sit in our little laboratory of artistry, problem solve. Oh, I have such a vision for how to change the world. But if you don't put rubber to the road and know how to actually execute it, the only place it happens is in our little imaginations. Absolutely. And then the top of the DAREHuman, what I call the DAREHuman diamond, is the advocacy, which is stepping into being the change that you want to see in the world. You cannot unsee it, and you start living that way.
That's incredible. Now, let me ask you, Susanne, did that come, the archetypes for you, did that come as a download for you, or something that you had seen across your whole lifespan and then had put together? So, and the reason that I ask this is because this is season 5D. I have plenty of guests that have so many different gifts and talents, and they've come from all different, places. So.
So for me, having been a coach and a consultant and a mentor and advisor for more than 30 years, when I decided to bring my business online, I knew I needed to codify it in some way, to give it a structure. And I started asking myself questions like, how is it that I work with the businesses I work with and the individual clients that I work with and the corporations that I work with to affect change? What is it that I take them through? And so what happens naturally when I'm in a boardroom with a corporation, standing at the whiteboard and coming up with stuff, that is always in the download for me. Like my biggest channeling place is in a boardroom standing in front of a whiteboard, the pen in my hand, like it just comes through. So I had to create that kind of atmosphere for myself around this new online business and say, okay, pretending I'm at the whiteboard of life, of DAREHuman world, what is that framework? How can I teach people how they can be a force for good in their own life, and then can become a force for good in the world? And so the archetypes came through as I was playing with the feminine energy dynamics of creation and self-knowledge, but also the masculine energy of dynamics of like the actual getting of shit done and making the money.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful fusing of the two energies together.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it's such an honor to actually have your work on this and to share your work on this podcast, because I know, like, with the direction that we're all going in already and how lots of things have shifted, that this is something that even applies to myself. Like, I'm very heart-centered, feminine, and on mission. But I was like, I still need to survive. And of course, most of my income that has been generated for most of my lifetime or professional career has come from real estate. So now that I'm shifting into that space, it's definitely a different ball game in this space. And so that's why I'm super interested in your program, because for obvious reasons, right? We attracted each other through frequency and vibration, even though it was an introduction.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And the thing is, like, when we find people to work with, people to dance with in life, like, I think we get to look at ourselves and go, where am I not as short up as I could be? If your masculine fuel is low in the tank, it means that your feminine flow isn't going to have the scaffolding to dance within. So everything I do is like, we set the structure, the masculine scaffolding, the container, the fuel, and then we dance through it. It's kind of like, if you ever went bowling with kids, they have those bumpers they put down in the bowling alley so the kids don't throw the bowling ball off.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the masculine structure gives you the framework and the freedom to dance. And that's what I love to do.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. It's exactly what we need moving into this time frame. Well, Susanne, let me ask you, we'll go back to DAREHuman again, because I'd like to touch on that towards the end. But let me ask you, you've done quite a few things in your lifetime. What have been some of your favorite things that you have done? Obviously you've gone into film,
Wow. Let's see. I think my favorite thing I've done as a category is that as a coach and a mentor and an advisor and a consultant, taking people on a journey to their own personal ahas, like I have become, that's my zone of genius. Like I can transform someone by helping them see pieces of themselves and unblocking, like that little brook. I have this skill for unblocking energy and unblocking bad thought patterns, right? So when people get to that, oh my God, I didn't even know that was possible for me. Like that is the greatest thing I've ever accomplished in my life on an individual level or on a corporate level.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what, like I was saying, for season 5, the reason that I wanted to really focus on the 5th dimensional consciousness, like unity consciousness, is the individuals that are out there that are in service to others are absolutely incredible. Mm-hmm. They've learned to identify what their gifts are and use that with the skill sets that they've used most of their lives. And that's where, like I said, that's exactly where we're going. So services, or like DAREHuman, is definitely a program that could be very beneficial to so many people on their journey.
No, thank you. And I would say the other thing that is probably the craziest thing I've ever done, but after the election in 2016, I was an interim CEO of a diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting firm. And I looked at the CEO and a day after the Trump election, and I said, I'm this white, Jewish, Ivy League educated CEO of a diversity, equity, inclusion consulting firm, and I know nothing about white rural Americans. And so I said, do you mind if I go visit some red states? She's like, I think it's a great idea. So I crowdfunded a bunch of money. I hired a film crew and I went to the reddest county in Alabama, the reddest state in the country. And I embedded there in and out for 3 years and started hosting adult exchange programs where I bring rural Americans to Boston and urban Americans to rural Alabama. And I try to see what we could do to heal the partisan and polarity divides in our country. Mm-hmm. Because I'm a bridge builder, not a bridge burner. Like I will do everything I can to always bridge challenges between people and have courageous conversations. So I would say that's probably one of the craziest things I've ever done, but it was so much fun.
Let me ask you, because you did, usually some people would do that maybe like a summer or something like that. You did it for 3 years. Let me ask you, what was the result of that, of your energy moving into there and creating that change?
There were a lot of really great things that came out of it personally and professionally. In terms of the people and what I think about the polarity that's existing in the world today, is that it's going to be very, very difficult to undo it. Mm-hmm. And I learned that there's a lot of abdication of responsibility when leaders in various communities say that to people, this is the one and only way. There's no room for thinking. Blind faith takes over. And so if you didn't get what you wanted in life, it's because you didn't pray hard enough, as opposed to you didn't take the action steps that are needed to support your dreams. So it was a real differentiator. And so what it led me to is recently I just launched a new YouTube channel, and I'm doing a show called The Rise of the Untamed Fox.
I was going to go there next.
Yeah. And what I realized is that there is this It's all based on a scientist in Russia in the 1950s who did experiments with foxes, breeding them, aggressive foxes with aggressive foxes and tame foxes with tame foxes. And what they were looking at, how do you domesticate animals? And what happened with the tame foxes, they became so docile. And tame foxes who are humans are beautiful people. They're kind and they're good and they're fair and they love to raise their vibration. And they're like, if we all just spread love, can we all just get along? The world will be better and humanity will elevate. And my thing is like, yeah, that's not true, because if you're looking away, the aggressive foxes over here are going to remake the world in the image that they desire, taking away rights that you want, taking away voting rights that are, part of the law. I mean, like if you're not looking, the world is going to get remade in a way that you don't want. So we have to look, and not only look, we have to use our voice. Mm-hmm. And so for me, coming out of Alabama and spending all this time hosting these adult exchange programs, the biggest thing that came out of it for me is the discovery of my voice as an untamed fox.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. I laugh though, Susanne, because that was me. But as time went by, I had to realize, right?
You were the tame fox?
I'm sorry?
You were the tame fox?
Yeah, like, let's just love, let's do this. But as, of course, that was my whole awakening journey, and it keeps unfolding. And then you create a heart's wisdom to understand that you're right. Like there's other things for me, I had too much of the rose tinted glasses, idealist and all that kind of stuff. But it's so important to fuse the two together. And that's why your work is really important. Yeah, it's really important, Susanne.
It's been a lifetime in the making. Some people look at my life and my career and they're like, wait a sec, this doesn't make sense together. All the things I've done, technology, film, social entrepreneurship, all the things. But for me, it makes complete sense, because everything we do leads up to the moment where we are.
Yes.
Everything we are leads up to the who that we can be to take that next step.
Yes, absolutely. It's incredible though, because I've had the same thing. We talked about this. For me, I've always seen cause media and 8 billion as a technology and media platform. I'm going into documentary film. So I'm all like, wow, you really could be my next coach, because and that's exactly it. It was, I have these big visions, but what is that imagination and the big visions going to be if I couldn't put it into use, into form, like here in the 3D or on Earth? And so that's why, like you're saying, the DAREHuman, because you've done it all. You've actually had, and on top of that, you're an awakened spiritual being. So that's amazing. One of the things that was really touching though, Susanne, I think that the last in our conversation that we had, and you kind of left me with this, is just, you're all like, you wish, now that you are deeply planted in your work with DAREHuman, you wish now that you had hundreds of more years to do this.
Yeah.
When do you feel like you got to that point?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think the backstory here and the context is really relevant, because as I mentioned, I had this awakening at 4, 5, 6, had this terrible thing happen to me, being called a Christ killer when I was young, and then went on this journey of being solidly in the matrix. But the problem with being in the matrix when you're a starseed, when you're a galactic being who is incarnated into this life, is that I never felt at home. I didn't feel like I belonged. And so I thought I was being otherized because of being called a Christ killer, but it turns out that just awoken my reality to the fact that I never felt at home. And like a lot of people who are highly sensitive people like me, who've had this awakening for a long time, I actually got so depressed, I tried to take my own life. And the fact that, and I've actually had 2 very, very deep suicidal periods in my life, and overcoming chronic PTSD and abuse and some things that have happened in my world has been the greatest gift of my life. I've become who I am because of these experiences. And because I like to say I'm a late bloomer, it took me a minute, even though I started early, like the universe made me go through all of these challenges, kind of like prove it moments. Are you really who you say you are? Prove it. Let's throw this at you. Prove it. Let's throw that at you. when I finally got to the point where I was like, gosh, I'm here and now I know what I'm doing and I'm emotionally rock solid and I can't wait to wake more people up so we can change the trajectory of our world. Like when I got there, I was like, I need another 100 years. Like I can't imagine stopping this work. I can imagine like doing it up until the grave.
Yeah. That's exactly how I feel. And you articulated that so perfectly, because there were moments like that in my life. Because it was, for me, what my son is going to be 18, and I separated from his father at 10 months. And I've had, since that point, I haven't had a relationship. And anything that I have had has only lasted 4 to 6 months. It's like a dating period and never got past that. Right. But, I've come to that conclusion, of course, in all of this, that it was all designed for my awakening. Yep. And then it seems like, as if it's not, you thought you got past that last one, and they threw another one at you. And then you're saying, are we going at this again? Until you really step into that space and say, like, this is me. Like, I'm so, it's unwavering because I know who I am now.
Yeah.
And that fear doesn't stop you anymore.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a, I call it mission possible. I'm a geek. I'll admit I'm a geek. And I've studied a lot about a lot of geeky things. And I was wanting to teach a program about fear. Mm-hmm. And I started watching, I don't know why, I was led to watch the movie The Right Stuff about Chuck Yeager breaking the sound barrier in the first plane that went supersonic. And there were so many pilots before him that when you get up to the speed of supersonic, speed of sound, what happens is that the waves of sound start piling up on top of each other and they create a ton of friction, and the ship starts to, or the plane starts to really shake, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of the pilots would actually eject from the plane because they got very afraid that the plane was going to fall apart. Or in some cases, the plane wasn't sturdy enough to manage to get through the speed of sound. Well, Chuck Yeager gets up there and he's like, I'm just going through it. And so it gets really shaky and he just like pumps it and he breaks through the sound barrier. And on the other side, he said, and this is a quote, it was like smooth as a baby's bottom. There was no friction when you're going faster than sound. The same exact thing is true of fear. Right as we're stepping up to a moment where it's like we're about to have an awakening, we're about to have a transformation in our life, we're about to have a conversation with someone that scares the bejesus out of us. The friction layers of fear behind fear behind fear behind fear prevent us from moving forward. But when we break through,
right,
life is smooth.
It's smooth. Exactly. For me too. And I've even just been experiencing this in the last few weeks, because like the energies of the transition have just been like the undercurrent of the ocean, right? And parts of it you have to surrender. And I get it, because like there's moments where like all this fear rises in my body. And I said, okay, Spirit, known or unknown, I said, it's pulling up to the surface. I said, bring it up to a place, or let me release it. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, for me, at least in the last few weeks, that has been about speaking my highest truth and my voice. And I can't begin to tell you, even my body feels free now. Because it is. That's what they're saying. Like in the 5D, it's about like having this power and like this fearlessness and a deep knowing. Mm-hmm. And you just navigate through everything.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah. Anchoring into 5D and realizing that everything is just a level of connectivity.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
Just random question out of curiosity, Susanne, you've gone into this work with 5D. Have you gone into like higher level? I know this might be a little off for a podcast, but have you gone into higher dimensions to do some work there?
So I'm actually in the process of working on a 12D ascension. So we'll see what happens.
Oh my gosh, this is already, what is this? Is Susanne, what, 25 point, what are you, 25.0?
25.0.
25.0. And then once you go to 12D.
We'll see.
Yes. So hang in there, audience. I'm pretty sure that those that are tuning in right now have kept up because they understand the verbiage and language that we're speaking.
Mm-hmm.
But let me ask you, I know you're going to be doing some travels in the near future. When you get back, are you going to continue and you're always continuing your work with DAREHuman? What do you see for the future in the next year or two that you'd like to do with that?
Yeah. So what we've done is our first year online, we built our core curriculum. So we have a thing called the DAREHuman Launchpad, where anybody who wants to come in and take like the freshman level courses of how to know yourself, live on purpose, get shit done, make money, be the change. Like all of that is now all recorded, and I recorded them all live. So they're amazing programs, and all of the master classes like Mission Possible and Lessons from the Matrix and Rock Solid and other things like that, all of them are in the DAREHuman Launchpad. So what that means for my business is that I have this passive income layer that can allow me to now work with higher level leaders who have more impact. Because my belief is that if we want to change the world, we need to work on the grassroots level, the grass middles level, and the grass tops level. So the grassroots level in the DAREHuman world is now satisfied with all of these programs and courses that people can self-study through. And then the grass middles level are the female entrepreneurs that I'm working with to literally I have a mastermind called the Elevate Her, and everybody in there is at 6 figures of impact and income. We're all focused on both and elevating from there. It's like, what button do you want to push on the Elevate Her? Where do you want to take yourself? And then on the higher levels, I'm really working with conscious leaders to help them make sure that they keep 2 feet on the ground, because ascension without bringing Mother Earth with you, ascension without bringing humanity with you, to me is not something that our world needs. Our world needs these spiritual people that I think of as balloons that need to be tethered back down to earth. And my job here, I think I mentioned this before, is like Mother Gaia is my spirit animal. My job on this planet is to elevate.
Oh my gosh. I feel like I'm talking to her because that's me though, Susanne. I'm all of a sudden my whole world came swirling in together. Like I'm up there, right? I'm like, okay, I got to come down to the ground. But I know that. I know Mother Earth. I know that, that's the big thing for me next month is going to the Philippines and doing this documentary anchored in climate change and climate control, but also speaking to the indigenous people and sharing their stories, right?
I love that.
So that's what, and I'm going to go back to your DAREHuman. You were talking about the empowered women. You talk about 6 figures of impact and 6 figures of income. So they make 6 figures while they're also giving out 6 figures of impact. Is that correct?
Well, every person in my world measures their own double or bottom triple line themselves. So one of the ways I measure part of my bottom line in DAREHuman is financial, but my other bottom line, my personal cause, is feeding people. So for instance, a lot of people, when they have a really big month online, they'll celebrate with balloons and champagne and all that stuff. And that's great. I'm not going to judge them. It's not for me. Balloons and helium are bad for the planet. Helium is a limited resource, a non-renewable natural resource. And when we run out of helium, we're done. And balloons end up in the stomachs of whales and other mammals, sea mammals. And so I don't do that. What I do when I have a huge month is I buy the equivalent amount of meals through Feeding America or No Kid Hungry to make sure that people have food. Because food insecurity is such a huge issue in our world. And, especially now, even in Ukraine, what's going on. So I've been sending money over to something called World Central Kitchen, which is about creating food for people who are at the border crossings or in refugee camps. For me, my double bottom line includes feeding people. My double bottom line also includes issues around race and privilege. So I host talks online called Race and Privilege. I bring together colleagues from the field, and we talk about everything from George Floyd to now what's happening in the Supreme Court. We really have these discussions about what does racism and what does privilege and anti-privilege work look like. Yeah. So those are my bottom lines where I want to have my impact. And so I can measure that. by how many people have come to see stuff, by how many mouths I've fed. Everybody in my world has a double bottom line or a triple bottom line.
That's incredible. Yeah, I know. I've been floating in the spirituality space for a while. For me, though, I work with the homeless. So it was nice to kind of it was nice to kind of ascend spiritually and kind of understand myself on a deeper level. But now the call, and I can really feel it. Spirit's like, Lisa, you've got to be planted on earth. This is why you were sent here.
Well, and perhaps that's why we met.
That's absolutely why we met. Now, Susanne, is there anything else that you want to share, the work that we didn't cover in this podcast, before I ask you to share, all how people can get a hold of you?
Well, I love this question. In my perfect world, if I were to paint the perfect world, people would become curious about things that they don't know, including things that give them discomfort. When we start to get comfortable with discomfort, change can happen. But when we're complacent with our comfort, nothing changes. And the people who are watching, the people who are purposefully remaking the world in an image that they would like, their world starts to take hold. And we're seeing this with authoritarianism spreading around the world, anti-democracy movements. It's just really populism, which is really a form of social authoritarianism, right? So what we're seeing in the world is that good, kind people are looking away, focusing on their lives, focusing on not watching the news because it hurts their feelings, not engaging in the world because it's too hard to watch. My message for them is work on your emotional intelligence. Because when you are emotionally strong, you can see something horrible happening across the world and you can be emboldened to engage and do something about it. But the more we look away, the less we have a hand in where this world is going.
Absolutely, 100%. And it's crazy how I am actually surrounded by quite a few of those women right now. I can probably say this because it will have viewed by the time I have launched this, but one of my guests for this season is Christina Lakiani, the co-founder of Mind Valley. And in our pre-podcast, in our meeting, we were talking about all the different things that we could actually speak about. And she's deeply implanted in all of that stuff right now, most especially because it's so close to home for her, what's happening in the Ukraine. But she's like, there's a part of her that is the mother. There's a part of her that is, that works deeply with a lot of the Russian programs that they have. So sometimes by even like in the professional side, she's saying that she has to speak about this, but you're absolutely right. When we have so much emotional intelligence, even the way we respond to it energetically can even make the difference in the world.
Yeah. Becoming unshakable has probably been the hardest thing and best thing I've done in my life.
And now you are so deeply rooted. And I admire you for that. And, only because I know the journey, because right now it's still like, I'm still feeling some of it. And but I already know the roots are there. They're just saying like, Lisa, remember, look deep within yourself, tap into that deep intuitive like power that you have. Nothing else out there can shake you, because you're really, in essence, we are the ones creating this world and reality for ourselves.
That's right.
Now, Susanne, okay. So if anyone from the audience would love to get a hold of you, become either a part of DAREHuman or even follow your show, The Untamed Fox, how would they be able to do that?
So I am Follow Susanne just about everywhere in the world. So Susanne is Susanne. So it's Follow Susanne. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. DAREHuman is a group. We meet on Facebook. So just go to the search bar on Facebook and type DAREHuman and you'll find our group and just answer the questions. You can come in. You can find me at SuzanneGoldstein.com. It's probably the landing pad where you can get to all of the different things I do in the world.
Yeah.
And I'd love to learn what people are interested, what makes them tick, what one thing, like if they were dissatisfied with one thing that's going on in the world right now, what's that one thing, and what little step do they think that they can take to start affecting change in that one area? I'm not telling everybody on the planet that they have to go run for office or run to Ukraine or do something like that. I'm suggesting to people that the size of your impact can be inside yourself and something else, right? If it's just inside yourself, we're not growing as a humanity. But if it's inside yourself and it's your community, or it's inside yourself and it's the school your kids go to, or it's inside yourself and it's something in your city or county, or inside yourself and your state or your country or a world or the universe, you get to pick the size of your impact, the amount of effort that you put into it, but pick the one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Susanne, for sharing your work, your mission, and your soul's wisdom here on the 8 Billion podcast. You will always have this platform to speak and project your message or amplify your message out there.
Thank you so much. And I do the Untamed Fox every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern time on YouTube. So that's probably like, if you want to get into the really like powerful stuff, that's where that happens.
And you guys should go ahead and check that out, because I think I've seen snippets of it already since our last talk. So that's the Untamed Fox 12 every Wednesday, 12 noon Eastern. So that would be 9 Pacific and then 11 Central.
Yes. And what we do, that's on YouTube, and I actually do it live. So people can engage with me, and we have conversations about tough stuff, but in a positive, enlightened way, so that people can walk away with something they can do that day. One of the things people get frustrated about, they're like, I don't know how to change the world. So what should I do today? So I'm constantly giving tips for people to engage in something that they can start this minute.
Wow. So here you go, audience. You could start now by tuning into that every Wednesday. So again, Susanne, thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of the 8 Billion podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And to everyone that tuned into this week's episode, thank you so much. And we will catch you on the next episode. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the 8 Billion podcast. If it's moved you in any way, please share your thoughts or give us a review on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. To listen to more episodes, go to 8billionpodcast.com, or to learn more about our mission, go to 8billionproject.com.